Hey you guys, Matt Allen, Tim Little, welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today we've got another buyer's guide for you. We are talking all things jigs.
The jig category can be giant. There's so many baits on the market. So today's buyer's guide, we're going to simplify it for you. We're going to go through all the different styles of jigs and give you our favorites. That way you're covered throughout the entire year, no matter which situation you get yourself into and you need to throw a jig. You want to start it off?
Sure. Yeah, we'll start off with baits. We'll do trailers as we go, and then we'll end with our favorite rods. Because like Tim said, it's a giant category. So I'm going to start off with swim jigs. Swim jigs are their own category, frankly. There are so many of them on the market. But we are just going to give you our absolute favorite from each one. If you want to keep this simple, go here. So I've got two swim jigs. This is the California swim jig. This is a bait we designed many years ago. It was the first heavy wire, heavy hook swim jig to ever hit the market. The California swim jig. Now this is a River to Sea D-Walker that I have on the back here. This is the 3/4 ounce. So this is the largest of the D-Walker, the 120. If I'm throwing the lightweights, like a 3/8, I'll go down to the 100 size of the D-Walker. So two sizes, depending if you're lighter weight or heavier weight. But the California swim jig with that gigantic gaff of a no-jack hook in it is my I want to catch a giant swim jig. That's what I throw at night. That's when I think we're going to be around giant largemouth, giant striper, fishing ultra heavy cover. That is the one. It is a very unique jig and it gets giant bites. You can put it on straight 65-pound braid. You can tie it on 25 or 30-pound leader. You can't lean on it hard enough to bend that hook. It's incredible. The other one is one that I've thrown a bunch this year, and that is the standard swim jig. So Dirty Jig standard swim jig. And that one has a little bit smaller hook in it. It's still a heavy wire hook, but it's more of a normal heavy wire jig hook. And then that one I've got paired up to the Gambler Easy, of all things. A bait I started throwing a bunch this year, and I really liked how that bait was fishing for me down in Florida last spring. Had a blast with it. That lighter bait, so I use them in tandem. One is my heavy cover, bust it through, catch those giants. The other one is fishing over and around the grass in lighter weights. That's how I choose between the two. It's a giant category narrowed down to two baits.
I'm going to try and keep this under an hour video. So
we'll try.
Oh, yeah, we'll try. I'm not going to be as long-winded, but you talked about no jack, so I'm going to talk about this guy right here. This is the Dirty Jigs no jack flipping hook. Big gaff on there. This is straight power on power. When you're flipping, you know, this is something you would use instead of a punch setup, right? Yep. An 1.5 ounce punch setup. This is what you're flipping into that real heavy cover or around heavy cover, and you're just going to go power on power, 65, sometimes 80-pound braid. You're not going to bend that hook out. That's what this jig was designed for, getting those big fish out of that heavy cover. And then paired up with, this is actually the Reaction Innovations, that's the Kinky Beaver. But as far as trailers, just something that kicks or flaps, something that has a lot of movement on that initial fall. But we'll link our favorites, the favorite colors down below in the video description. But that is that no jack flipping hook. That is a killer flipping hook.
The next one I'm going to talk about is the pitching jig. This is the most universal of all the jigs. So the flipping jig has a pointed head. It's incredible around grass, but it will struggle around wood and rock because it will wedge in. It's for grass. The pitching jig has more of a rounded style, archy style head, and that will fish well through everything. Maybe not perfect for grass, but it'll do it. Maybe not perfect for rock, but it will do it. Just the most universal option there is. I pair those up most of the time with a beaver. Standard sweet beaver, do nothing action. Sometimes I want a little more action, and I'll go to that 4-inch Paca Slim. But either dead action or a little bit of kicking, one or the other. But that pitching jig is remarkable for all around. Now this is the compact pitch and jig. It is just a smaller hook, same style head, smaller hook. What that allows me to do is take that same do everything jig and throw it on lighter line. So if you are on a fishery that's just not traditionally a power fishery, you've got clearer water, focus your time on the compact pitch and jig because you can drop down to light line and get those fish. If you know you're going to be around big ones, around heavy cover, you might stick a monster pitch and jig. That's my main go-to if I could only have one.
Yeah, we've done in-depth videos on each of these styles of jigs before in seminars and stuff, but we're going to try and narrow it down. Next category of jig, this is probably the most common for me growing up Northern California, highland reservoirs, spotted bass fishing, is going to be some kind of finesse football jig. You know, that finesse football head and with a lighter wire hook. So you're talking 10, 12, 14-pound fluorocarbon, braid to leader sometimes, but finesse, so clear water. Two baits for you. The first one's going to be the Bass Patrol finesse football. What's cool about this bait is it's that living rubber, so this bait really shines in cold water. A little bit different movement than your traditional jig skirt, but paired that up with a twin tail grub, Yamamoto. Great colors, great size, typically the 5-inch, sometimes the 4-inch. The other bait I have for you is going to be the Dirty Jigs. That's the finesse football. Now I have two. That does not have the living rubber, but this is a warm water trailer. This is the one by Big Bite Baits, but specifically this color. This is tilapia. I love that color around the country, Florida, all over.
It just gets them.
It just gets them. It has a little bit of everything in there. Maybe bluegill. Maybe that's why it works so well.
That's what I think it is.
But that is a warm water twin tail grub. But yeah, that finesse football, that Dirty Jigs finesse football, and then that living rubber by Bass Patrol. Those are my two favorite clear water, light wire finesse football jigs.
Next one up, and we're going fast here. We will link all of these in the video description if you're not familiar with these buyer's guides. The purpose of this guide is to help you find the right baits for you, as well as to help your loved ones around the holidays who might be shopping for you. So you can give them that video with that video description. It's laid out very clearly. Every bait, every trailer, our favorite colors and sizes, and then as well as the rods and reels. In the finesse jig category, I have just one, and this is literally the finesse jig. More compact, smaller hook, finesse cut skirt. So they take half that skirt and they cut it off. And it's just a completely different profile. And then I'll pair that up with either a double tail grub or a chunk to complete that profile. So this is a packet chunk, the standard size packet chunk. But where you insert a finesse jig is everywhere that you would throw a shaky head. So if you're on a good bite, throwing a shaky head, and you want to try and get a bigger fish, jigs just have a way about getting a big bite. So if you're wondering, where do I plug a finesse jig in? It's right there. Maybe you're shooting at dock pilings, just going down dock fishing all day long. That's one of the main places that I personally fish a finesse jig. But anywhere that I've been on a shaky head bite and I want to try and upsize, I'll grab a finesse jig, especially post-spawn.
Very cool. Next jig that I'm going to talk about, I actually have two jigs. No, you have one more.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll do one, you do one. It's going to be, these next two I'm going to consider them micro jigs. Finesse jig,
yeah,
I mean look at that compared to...
That's a finesse jig. That's a micro jig, that's fair.
This is the Kitech, I'm going to call it the micro jig. But what's cool about this jig is it's tungsten. So you get the sensitivity, the feel of tungsten, that harder material down there on bottom, a lot easier to feel than lead. But keeping that really small, compact profile, you can go with heavier weights, 3/8, half ounce, that sort of stuff. And it doesn't have to be a giant football head to get that on that little tiny finesse micro jig. Now, we started playing with these around like probably 2-3 years ago.
Probably longer than that. It's been a while.
And where it first started for me was fishing in clear water in current. I needed to get that bait down, so I needed to bulk up the head to get down on bottom, big smallmouth. and this has just turned out to be a staple in our micro jig. You know, you can throw these on. You can throw these on a spinning rod, but light bait caster, straight fluoro, braid to light fluoro leader. That's a cool little package, and I paired that up. That's that tiny pocket. Say that.
Tiny Paca?
Yeah, say that 5 times fast. Tiny Paca chunk, right? Just pairs perfectly with that little micro jig. But that tungsten Kitech is money.
This one, this is from Jewel Baits. This is the Pee Wee Football. Again, a little micro jig. It's got a single wire keeper for your weed guard and more of a sickle style hook. There's 2 things that I like about this jig. One is that it has this ultra thin skirt, so it's just that much more finessey. And number 2 is that when you see the price tag, that is for a 2-pack, not for
nice.
1. So it is a budget alternative, and it's a great little jig. This one I paired up to the Bugs, Z-Man TRD Bugs. There's just a couple of these little trailers. Sometimes you want dead action, sometimes you want that thing kicking.
Right.
But they're great small profile trailers to pair up to these jigs.
Yeah, Matt said something really key there, and you're probably wondering why we have all these different trailers, but it totally depends on water temperature, right? You don't want a jig that's totally down there kicking in the wintertime, and vice versa. Summertime, you don't want a dead action jig. You need something with some flap or some kick. But last jig for me is going to be this guy. This is the little Nishini, I'm going to say Nishini micro jig. But the 2 things I like about this jig, one is the skirt, the material, and more importantly, the way it's cut. It's almost like a, I don't know, how would you describe that?
Textured?
Textured, yeah. It's got just a different style of skirt. And then the other thing is, out of the entire lineup, this is the only jig that does not have a wire or a weed guard. So easier to get that hook penetration on light line without having to really jack them. You know, sometimes, a lot of the times,
you might want to stick them on 6-pound line.
Right. A lot of times the fish will hook themselves with that exposed hook, but little different style head comes through rock better, a little wider, kind of, I guess, bulbous head on there. But that guy right there, these 2 little micro jigs have been killer for me.
Now with that, how was that for an incredibly fast rundown of the entire jig category? We've got 4 rods for you. I'll do my 2 and then you do your 2. Okay. How about that? These are my 2 favorite jig rods for completely different things, okay? This rod is almost always sold out, but the last time I checked, it was back in stock, which is a small miracle. Hopefully it still is by the time you see this. This is Megabass's Orochi Braillist. The Braillist is an incredible jig rod. Finding the right combination of action for jigs is extremely difficult, especially for larger jigs, more weight. It's very difficult to find a rod with enough tip to fish that jig properly, enough backbone to plant the hook, and then again enough tip to keep them pinned when they're coming up and thrashing with that heavy jig in their mouth. Hands down, the Braillist is my favorite all-around jig rod. Smaller flipping jigs, pitching jigs, slam dunk. That is the deal. Paired up to a Metanium, I get insane distance out of it. I mean, it's a high-end combo. It's an amazing, amazing setup. For my middle jigs, if you will, my Finesse jig, not the micro jig, Finesse jig, and my Finesse footballs. I throw that on G. Loomis's MBR line of rods, specifically the 844. The 844 MBR, this is a GLX. That 844 MBR, same deal. Incredible combination of super soft tip and then great backbone once you've got them hooked up. It's just a very unique combination that does a phenomenal job for these baits. The cool thing with these is that you can get that MBR action at their different price points as well. So you don't necessarily need a GLX with a Metanium. You could get it in an IMX Pro. And say, I think in the GCX, their lowest line, it's only the 843. So if you're going to throw that one, 843 MBR, so 1 power down, throw it with braid to leader. If you have the 44, the 4 power, you could do braid to leader or fluoro. But otherwise, 844 MBR, amazing.
Those are both awesome, awesome combos. A little bit higher end on the price point, so I'm going to go opposite. I'm going to go budget.
Mm-hmm.
I really like this. So it's like Matt talked about when he's talking about the bracelets. It's really hard to find the right action, the right length, all that stuff for a jig. You'd think it'd be easy, but it's not.
It's not. It's one of the hardest categories.
And the SLX, the 7'5" medium heavy. So you have the length, so you can really lean on them, get those longer casts. But that tip section really loads up, doesn't unload quick enough to let them spit that bait. But that 7'5" medium heavy, paired up with that SLX XT, that's just an awesome, awesome combo in that price point. A lot less expensive than those
drastically
high-end combos. So if you're looking for a budget-friendly jig setup, that guy is money. And then another killer combo that I really like for the smaller
little micro
jigs is going to be the 610 medium or medium heavy. Two different options for you depending on the weight of the jig themselves. But there's something, it's just fun to fish. That 610 length with that lighter line with that micro jig, and those big fish are just, I mean, it's just something to
It's a riot.
Yeah, it's fun to fish. Pair that up with a Corrado 70. It's just, everything's downsized. But that 610 medium heavy, and then that 70 MGL are fantastic, lighter, smaller jig combo.
One thing about that combo, a lot of times when we're recommending combos, people ask, what else can I do with it? If you get that combo in the medium, that is also a phenomenal
Blade bait rod.
Jerkbait rod.
Jerkbait,
blade bait.
It does a lot.
Tail spinners, small topwaters.
Some topwater, yep.
It's a phenomenal do-everything rod. All right, guys, with that, I think we will wrap it up. We've still got some more buyer's guides coming for you. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.
See you guys.